Hey there. Tonight, we venture into a different kind of tale. One stripped of glamour, forged in cold iron, and grounded not in legend, but in reality. There are no dragons waiting in the shadows, no flawless champions glowing with divinity. Instead, you'll find a story carved from duty, stained with fear, and carried forward by the bruised hands of those who endured. This is the life behind the steel, the ache beneath the armor, the quiet persistence of a soul molded by war, restless sleep, and the fading echo of a glory that never quite belonged to them. If this story soothes your mind, brings even a moment of calm, feel welcome to like and subscribe, but only if it brings you peace. And leave a comment telling me where you're tuning in from and what time it is. There's something strangely comforting about knowing others are drifting off at the same hour, swept into the same quiet journey through time. Now dim your lights. Let the flame in your mind cast shadows across stone walls. Settle in. Let us begin with the first step on the long road to knighthood. It starts when you're 7, and it doesn't begin with a sword. It begins with a goodbye, a farewell that isn't marked by ceremony or fanfare, but by the subtle relief on your parents' faces as they send you to serve under a noble lord. There's no farewell letter, no keepsake to remember home by. Just a rough pat on the back, a satchel of clothes, and the crushing expectation now resting on your too small shoulders. No one asks if you're ready. Readiness doesn't matter. You are now a page. The castle looms above you, cold towers scraping the gray sky. It offers no comfort, only promise. Not of glory, but of grind. The heavy gate yawns open, and you step into a world that doesn't recognize your dreams. This isn't a place of honor. Not yet. It's a place of endless scrubbing, errand running, and surviving days that never seem to end. Chivalry isn't handed to you. It's earned, slowly, painfully, through muck and bruises and silence. You rise at dawn. You work until stars claim the sky. You sweep the great halls, deliver messages, serve meals, and yes, scrub armor. You think that part will be exciting, until you're bent over for hours scraping dried horse dung from metal boots that weigh more than you do. Your fingers blister, your back burns, and the knights, they walk past you like you're a chair. You are not one of them, not yet. You are invisible. You are the help. Still, training sneaks in. Wooden practice swords are doled out like cleaning rags. You fight other boys eager to prove themselves. Your arms soon painted in blue and purple bruises. You're taught to fall from a horse without snapping your neck. You fall a lot. Some days that feels like the main lesson. No one praises you for falling well, but show weakness, that earns a scolding. Pain is to be swallowed, not spoken. Discipline is everything. You bow low, speak only when addressed. Obey every command, no matter how small or shameful. Your errors are corrected with slaps or punishment. One boy forgets to take off his cap in front of a lady and spends 2 full days kneeling in the chapel, praying for humility. No one forgets after that. If your family is wealthy, you're lucky, there might be a tutor. You might learn to read, write, maybe even mutter some Latin. But Latin mostly helps with church services and headstones. If you're poor, you learn through listening and mimicry. You copy prayers. You trace letters onto borrowed parchment with shaking hands. Literacy is a gift. Muscle matters more. Obedience matters most. You learn strange things, like how to stand frozen still for hours during royal banquets, balancing trays of steaming food while nobles talk and complain. You learn to become invisible when tempers rise and to vanish entirely when wine turns knights into beasts. Every moment teaches you something: how to stay quiet, how to stay safe. Your days begin in the chapel, always cold, always echoing. You kneel on hard stone, breath visible in the air, fighting to stay awake as priests drone on about divine purpose and sacred fire. You nod, you pray. Mostly you pray not to get sick. Illness is everywhere. Cures are rare. Meals are fast. Bread, cheese, maybe some meat if you're lucky. Vegetables? Suspicious. Most believe raw greens cause disease. So you chew stale crusts and salted pork, eating fast, because there's always another task waiting. On feast days, rare and unforgettable, you might get roasted pig or sweet oat cakes soaked in honey. You'll remember them for years. Nights bring minstrels and music, songs of King Arthur, St. George, and valorous deaths. You listen from the floor, near the fire. You want to be inspired, but your feet ache too badly. Still, deep down, you hope that someday someone will sing of you. Sleep comes on straw pallets shared with other boys, in rooms that smell of sweat and mildew. Sometimes you're pulled from sleep to help with late guests or early departures. You rise without a word, work through the exhaustion. A night, you've heard, must always be ready. So you practice. You're not alone. Other pages suffer beside you. You form quiet bonds, knotted friendships and whispered complaints. Together, you learn which nights are cruel, who might turn a blind eye to a stolen crust of bread, and where to hide for just a few minutes of silence. There are laughs too. A joke from the cook, a dog that trips a night, a stolen apple. These moments, small as they are, keep you going. Occasionally, the world outside peeks in. Merchants bringing silks, traveling performers, a noblewoman's procession. It all feels distant, like watching a dream through fogged glass. You are not part of that world. Not yet. And sometimes you doubt. You wonder if all this pain, this hunger, this constant servitude, is really leading somewhere. But then you see a knight ride out, armor glinting, banner high, and your breath catches. Someday that could be you. You attend ceremonies, stand still and silent as nobles parade in fabrics you aren't allowed to touch. You are reminded by glances, by words, that you belong nowhere near their world. When visitors arrive, the castle becomes a stage. You clean obsessively, polish everything. If anything goes wrong, the pages are blamed. You master the art of appearing busy while being nowhere near trouble. During festivals, there's music, wine, dancing. You watch from corners. Sometimes someone hands you a treat. For a moment, the burden lifts. Some pages escape into books if they're lucky enough to read. The steward's room holds precious manuscripts, guarded more tightly than the armory. On rare nights, a scribe reads aloud, stories of ancient wars, divine miracles. They feed your mind as your body heals. There are warnings too, mutters about pages who cracked under pressure or vanished in disgrace. You hear things you shouldn't. Learn to listen. Learn when to be silent. The castle shapes you, beats you, hones you. You're not a knight, not yet, but you're no longer a child either. You're something in between, harder, hungrier, more determined. At night, beneath the rafters and scratchy straw, you think not of what you've endured, but what comes next. The journey isn't over, not even close, but you've survived the first step. You're a page, and for now that is enough. By the time you turn 14, your days as a page come to a close, not with hugs or kind words, but with a sharp turn into something harder. You're no longer just a boy running errands in the shadow of giants. You're now a squire, and while that word might sound like a promotion, what it truly brings is less sweetness and far more bruises. Your tasks shift from distant to direct. No longer just a face in the crowd, you're now tethered to a single knight. You attend him in every way, his shadow, his servant, his right hand. If he rides into a storm of swords, you go. If he falls, you drag him out or die trying. You're not simply part of the castle anymore. You belong to him. The training sharpens. You ride war horses now. Not the docile, grazing kind from storybooks, but towering beasts bred for battle, with thick muscles, sharp hooves, and unpredictable tempers. Climbing onto one is a struggle. Staying on is a fight. Every step jars your spine, your legs burn, and your backside becomes a constant ache. Swordplay intensifies. No more wooden blades, now you wield cold, real steel. Not to kill, not yet, but sharp enough to tear skin and shatter pride. You spar daily. Your body becomes a canvas for bruises. Some never fade before others bloom. For every hit you land, 3 return in kind. Your knight doesn't care about elegance. He watches for grit. But the worst chore, the one that drains not just time but will, is armor maintenance. You soon learn a knight's armor isn't just protection. It's a system, a second skin that requires constant attention. Sweat, mud, even insects wedge themselves into joints and straps. You clean every link, polish every hinge. If something pinches, if a strap snaps mid-charge, if a visor jams in battle, it's your fault. And if your knight dies because of it, you'll wish you had, too. Weapons demand similar devotion. Swords must be sharpened. Lances tested for cracks. Shields checked for weakness. No one claps when you get it right. But if something fails, everyone remembers who was to blame. Then there are the tournaments, the events that once shimmered in your boyhood dreams. Trumpets blare, crowds cheer, and brightly colored flags snap in the wind. But you're not there to enjoy them. You carry lances, saddle horses, wipe blood from your knight's cheek so he can smile for the audience. If he wins, you collect coin. If he loses, you collect his broken ribs and shattered pride. Eventually, real war arrives. It always does. And this time, you're not in the background. You march beside your knight into mud, into rain, into nights so cold your breath turns to ice and your fingers stiffen around your sword. Food is scarce. Sleep even rarer. Your armor rubs raw spots into your skin. But you keep moving, because that's what's expected. Battle, when it comes, isn't like the songs. There's no grace in it. Just noise, roars, screams, the crash of steel, the squelch of wet mud and the stink of blood. You hear orders, then lose them in the din. You see faces, then they vanish. Everything becomes movement and instinct and terror. You're not there to fight, not directly, but you're far from safe. When your knight is unhorsed, you dive into the chaos. You find him, drag him. This man covered in metal and pain, through a hell of arrows and spears. His armor is heavier than you remembered. The ground grips your boots like it wants to keep you. Arrows fall like rain, and still you pull. You don't think. You move. When he's wounded, you tend to him. When he's captured, you beg, negotiate, run messages through enemy lines. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. Diplomacy becomes a second weapon. Your voice must be soft, your words careful, your pride hidden. Even silence becomes a tool. Now and then, something small but fierce stirs inside you, pride. When you lead your knight's horse through camp and other men glance your way. When your knight nods to you after surviving another slaughter. These moments don't last, but they shine briefly, like sunlight through broken shutters. They remind you why you keep going. Back at the castle, life resumes, but it's different now. You're not the lowest anymore. You teach younger pages, showing them the same lessons that once broke your own pride. You organize hunts, help prepare banquets. You stay near your knight during high feasts, watching important guests with wary eyes. Your boots are cracked, your sword chipped, and your body aches in ways only soldiers understand. But you're not a servant anymore. You're something else. You're watched now, evaluated, judged not just for your obedience, but for your decisions. You feel it in how people speak to you, in how your knight speaks to you, with less command, more expectation, and you begin to think of things, personal things, a coat of arms, perhaps. What colors, what creatures, what motto would you choose to represent your life? You dream quietly of the moment you'll kneel, the sword on your shoulders. The transformation from squire to knight feels distant, but it also feels inevitable, as if your whole life is crawling toward it. But there are dark days, days when another squire doesn't get up, when he's crushed beneath a horse or skewered by a lance that was supposed to be dull. No songs are written for squires, no poems for the boys who almost made it. You learn to carry grief without weeping, to bury someone at dawn and serve dinner by dusk. If your knight is wise, and some are, he teaches more than swordplay. He teaches how to lead, how to read men, how to choose your battles, and how to lose without shame. These are the lessons no armor can protect you from, but you carry them deeper than any blade. Then winter arrives, and you understand why steel is a burden. Your fingers crack from the cold, buckles freeze in place. Your knight's armor is like strapping frost to your skin. The training yard becomes a frozen pit of mud. Horses slip, so do you. But there's no point complaining. The weather doesn't care. You hear whispers, talk of rebellions far off, of kings summoning their vassals. You listen, quietly measuring the cost. Glory always sounds like a grave when you've seen enough of it. Still, if called, you'd ride. Waiting is worse than war. You write your first letter, stiff, awkward, full of formality. You send it home if your family still lives, if you know where to send it, but writing it feels right, like proof that you still exist beneath the steel and silence. One night, after a feast, your knight, half drunk and half lost in memory, tells you about his first battle, the rain, the hunger, the sudden joy of being alive. Then he grows quiet and names 3 men who didn't make it back. You don't interrupt. You're meant to listen, to remember. You train every day, sometimes in secret. You mimic your knight, his stance, his grip, the tilt of his blade. You bleed, you stumble, you learn, and then one morning everything changes. There's no trumpet, no announcement, just your name spoken calmly. You're to ride with your knight, not as an errand boy, but as his second. You don't sleep the night before. You don't need to. When you mount your horse, your hands are steady. You are not perfect. You are not fearless. But you are ready. Your story is still being written. But already, it's etched in calloused hands, in bruises earned in silence, in nights spent cleaning blades instead of dreaming. You are not a boy anymore, not yet a knight, but closer, much closer. You are a squire, and you are becoming. You're around 21 now, or close enough. For some, knighthood comes earlier. For others, later. The age isn't what matters. What matters is this: someone with power has finally decided you're ready. Ready to kneel. Ready to swear. Ready, at least in theory, to carry the weight of a title that means life and death now comes with formality. There's no transformation. You don't wake up taller or stronger. Your voice doesn't drop. You still ache from yesterday's training. There's mud on your boots and a scar that won't fade across your shoulder. But this is the moment you've spent your whole life crawling toward. Through pain, duty, failure, and grit. It begins alone. You're given a cold, narrow room. Just stone, shadows, a thin blanket, and a flickering candle. No feast, no cheers, just silence. You fast, you kneel, you reflect. The idea is to purify the soul, to prepare yourself for sacred vows. You're told to meditate on duty, defending the weak, serving your Lord, upholding the church. And you try, but the hunger gnaws. Your knees ache. You wonder how much longer you have to sit before someone comes. You wonder whether anyone would notice if you sat down for 5 minutes or stole a sip of water. You wonder if this room, this moment, is what transformation really feels like. Or if it's just waiting with a different name. You're not the first to keep this vigil. Others have knelt here. Some trembling with nerves, some hiding yawns, some trying to remember the right words. You try to recall every creed, every blessing, every line you're meant to say. You push aside the rumors of squires vomiting during the ceremony, of one who fainted while kneeling. You hope you won't join their memory. At dawn, they come for you. The great hall is lit with 100 candles. Tapestries ripple in the morning air. The nobles are dressed in full finery, silk and velvet and gold. Priests stand in silent expectation. Knights, lords, even a few of your peers, people who barely noticed you before, now watch with quiet intensity. This is no longer training. This is right. Your name echoes across the hall. You step forward. You kneel. Your liege approaches. Or perhaps, if your rank permits, a king. In his hand is a sword. Not always the one he fights with. Sometimes just a ceremonial blade that shines like a mirror. He raises it, and it hovers near your shoulder. Your breath catches. The blade touches you, first the left, then the right. You've been dubbed. The motion is swift. The meaning enormous. In some regions, they still follow the old ways and deliver a light slap. A symbolic blow to remind you that pain, both physical and moral, comes with the title. It's more a pat than a strike, but you feel it. Then comes the oath. You speak carefully. You pledge loyalty to your lord, to God, to the values of chivalry. You swear to protect the weak, to uphold truth, to serve with honor. You say the words slowly, clearly, though part of you wonders how many actually live by them. And then you rise, not as a servant, not as a squire, but as a knight. There's no thunderclap, no divine chorus, but something in the air has changed. Eyes that once dismissed you now study you with recognition. Your peers clap your shoulder. Your lord gives a nod that might as well be a standing ovation. The priest murmurs a blessing, and that is that. Sometimes a feast follows. It depends on wealth, on mood, on timing. If there is one, you sit higher at the table. Your goblet is fuller, the congratulations warmer. Nobles you once served wine to now call you by name. Not all knighthoods are so ceremonial. Some squires are dubbed in the mud of a battlefield. Some during sieges with arrows still in flight. The sword still touches your shoulders. The oath is still spoken, but the setting, the tone, it changes the memory. Regardless, the title is yours now, and with it comes weight, not the kind you carry on your back, but the kind that follows you into every room. You are no longer simply a follower. Now you must lead. No one tells you this part, but the truth is, knighthood is not a destination. It's a threshold. One crossed, your world reshapes. You are now responsible for lives, for choices, for consequences. You ride at the front, not the rear. You make decisions instead of simply obeying them. The same sword that tapped your shoulders now belongs to you, and no one checks your judgment anymore. If you fail, it will be loud, and it will be yours alone. You are accountable in ways you weren't before. Your word binds you. Your signature seals agreements. If you disappear from court, it's noticed. If you skip mass, it's whispered about. If you drink too much or speak too freely, it doesn't just stain your name. It stains your banner, your house, and your reputation. Make a mistake now, and it travels faster than a galloping horse. Your duties expand. If you're granted land, it must be managed. That means collecting rents, settling disputes, protecting roads, and ensuring the fields stay productive. You imagine knighthood would mean battle, and it does. But more often, it means administration, negotiation, logistics. You're a warrior, but also a manager, a judge, and occasionally a tax collector. You don't draw your sword every day, but you sign your name more times than you swing a blade. And both actions carry weight. You're given a squire now, a boy, eager, clumsy, watching you the same way you once watched your knight. You teach him how to polish armor properly, how to saddle your horse without bruising it, how to speak in court and stay silent in battle. First, you're gentle, then firm. He forgets things, makes mistakes. You correct him, but when no one is looking, you smile. He reminds you of yourself. Then there's your coat of arms. If you haven't had one already, now you must choose. A lion? A stag? A rising sun? What colors? What motto? They're more than decoration. They speak for you. They ride ahead of you. They say who you are before you draw breath. Your new armor is fitted to your frame, if your family has coin or your lord is generous. Every plate measured, every hinge checked. Full armor is no small gift. It must be molded to your body. Greaves for your legs, gauntlets for your hands, cuirass for your chest. It's heavy. Walking in it feels unnatural at first. But inside it, you feel something you haven't in years: safe. Not invincible, just steadier. The metal guards your body, yes, but it also guards your name. You take your first formal ride through the village. This time, not behind a column, but at its head. Children stop and wave. Elders nod. A woman tosses you a flower. You keep your posture. You try not to grin. They don't cheer. Not really. But they watch. And in this world, attention is its own applause. That night, back in your chambers, you remove your armor slowly, reverently, each piece placed carefully. You stare into the polished metal. Try to see what they saw today: a knight, a protector, a leader. You don't believe it yet. Not fully. But you will. You still wake early. Still train daily. Still groan when your elbow catches a strike. But your name carries more now. Your words travel further. The younger squires glance at you with a mixture of awe and fear. You remember that look. You wore it once. War will come again. It always does. And next time, they will expect you at the front. No more waiting behind a shield wall. No more fetching orders. You will be the one shouting them. And whether those orders save lives or end them, that burden now rests with you. If you're lucky, you return from battle with honor. If not, your banner returns without you. That's the unspoken cost of the sword on your shoulder. The price of the title. Still, you are proud. Not of your title, but of your survival. Of everything you endured to stand here. You are a knight now. And your real service has only just begun. You don't become a knight and suddenly feel powerful. You become a knight, and then someone straps 60 pounds of steel onto your body and tells you to climb onto a horse. The first real lesson of knighthood isn't about courage or swordplay. It's about balance. How to breathe under pressure. How to move without collapsing. At first, it's chainmail, thousands of small iron rings draped across your shoulders like an unforgiving shroud. It doesn't look heavy, but it tugs at your limbs, clings to every drop of sweat, and turns climbing stairs into a chore. Beneath it, you wear a padded gambeson, quilted linen, thick with stuffing. It smells terrible after one day, worse after a week. But it keeps the iron from shredding your skin. As warfare advances, so does your gear. Plate begins to replace mail. First a breastplate, then greaves for the legs, pauldrons for your shoulders, vambraces for your forearms. Then come sabatons for your feet, segmented joints, articulated elbows, dozens of riveted pieces that creak and clang. Each new plate protects, but also restricts. They promise you won't be pierced. They don't promise comfort. Eventually, you're sheathed head to toe in steel. You don't wear your armor. You inhabit it. You become something else entirely, part man, part fortress. The helmet is the worst. It crushes sound, narrows your vision, turns your breath into fog on cold mornings. Some helms have visors you can lift, but those make you vulnerable. Better air or better protection, you choose with every moment. Mobility isn't impossible. If you're trained well, you can run, crouch, even roll, but not gracefully. You move like a man wading through water, deliberate, heavy. Every motion is calculated because effort is a limited resource, and your enemy, especially if he wears leather, is always faster. You are not swift. You are inevitable. Then there's the upkeep. Armor rusts, hinges stick. A single dent in the wrong spot can buckle under the next blow. Every strap, Every buckle, every inch of steel must be cleaned, oiled, inspected. Your squire becomes part knight, part blacksmith. If he forgets a strap or leaves a clasp too tight, you feel it immediately. If he misses a crack in your chest plate, it could kill you. And your weapons, your sword is your constant companion. But it's not elegant. It's not thin or sleek. It's broad, built for slashing, not fencing. It's kept sharp, yes, but not so sharp it chips on bone. It's a workhorse, not a showpiece. You draw it only when necessary. It's a symbol, yes, but mostly it's a tool. Then there's the lance. The lance is 10 feet of sharpened wood, meant to be tucked under your arm and driven like a battering ram into the chest of another armored rider. It turns the speed of your horse into a deadly point of impact. When it hits like a thunderclap. But it's unwieldy, easy to miss with, and breaks after one good strike. Once it splinters, it's kindling, good for nothing except warming hands. The mace is a brutal answer to armor, a lump of iron on a stick. No finesse, no technique, just a weapon designed to crush whatever stands in front of you. It doesn't cut, caves. When blades bounce, the mace makes itself known. Axes are similar, less popular among noble-born knights. But in close quarters, an axe hooks shields, drags riders from saddles, splits helmets with ease. It's not refined, but neither is battle. Then there's your shield, sometimes kite-shaped, sometimes heater-style, slung across your back or strapped to your arm. It bears your coat of arms, a flash of color in a world of smoke. You learn to strike with it, to block with it, to absorb momentum and redirect violence. A good shield saves your life. A bad one becomes dead weight. Siege weapons, catapults, trebuchets, battering rams are operated by others, usually engineers. You don't often touch them, but you learn to fear them. No amount of armor will stop a falling boulder. When those machines roar, you take cover or pray. And then comes the charge. You lower your visor. The world narrows into a tunnel. You couch your lance. Your horse tenses. The horns blare. Then you ride. Hooves churn the earth. The field becomes a blur of banners and armor. Time slows. You lock onto your target. The lance vibrates in your hand. Your shoulder burns with the pressure. And then impact. If you hit, you hear it. Feel it. A crack that shakes your bones. If you miss, the ground meets you fast and without grace. If you fall, you hope your squire gets to you before a second charge tramples you into the mud. Survive the charge and the melee begins. Sword drawn, shield raised, man to man. It's chaos. Less dance, more demolition. You aim for joints, armpits, the back of the knee. These are the gaps, the soft spots. Every knight has them. If you don't find theirs, they'll find yours. After battle, if you're lucky enough to stand, your next role is that of repairman. You strip off each piece of armor. Every dent is a memory. Every scratch a narrow escape. You clean. You sharpen. You prepare because next time might not offer a second chance. You grow picky about steel quality, leather weight, the curve of a sword handle, the angle of a visor. You learn your smiths by name. You know who double checks their work and who doesn't. The difference is survival. Some knights decorate their armor. Etched crests, gilded hilts, embroidered surcoats. If you have coin, you might too. But beneath the decoration, the truth remains. Armor is not fashion. It is survival. It's expensive. Maintaining it eats your earnings. Spoils from war or tournaments vanish into repairs, new fittings, straps, padding. And then there's the heat. A summer march in full armor is like walking inside an oven. You sweat rivers. Flies swarm. You faint if you're not careful. You smell like cooked meat. Despite everything, you trust it. You've tested it under arrow fire. You've taken mace strikes that should have broken ribs and walked away. Protects. It also transforms. You walk differently in it. People part when they see you. Children point. Peasants bow. But you know this armor doesn't make you invincible. It just buys you time. You can train perfectly. You can sharpen your blade, polish your greaves, and still fall to one lucky strike. One arrow, one slip. A knight's tools are not guarantees. They are only chances. And when the day ends, and you sit on a stool, your armor cooling beside you, you feel every bruise, every sore muscle. You lift each piece slowly, reverently, like setting aside parts of yourself. Beneath it all, you are not iron. You are not untouchable. You are just a man who wears steel well. And the next day, you do it all again. Your squire checks the straps. You adjust the padding. You pick up your gauntlets and buckle them on. You nod. He nods back. And then you step once more into the weight of your calling. Because no matter how tired, how scarred, how human you are, someone still needs you to stand between danger and the defenseless. This is the burden you chose, the life you forged, plate by plate, blade by blade. You carry it not because it makes you strong, but because it reminds you why strength matters at all. They told you there was a code, a shining ideal, a creed that gleamed as bright as polished steel beneath the sun. Chivalry, they called it. The word alone shimmered with promise. A life of courage, honor, courtesy, the protection of the weak, the service of faith. They wrote it in gilded script, sang it in ballads, praised it from pulpits. And then you rode into your first real war and saw a knight, cloaked in splendor, trample a wounded man too slow to crawl away. And you realize something: the code is a suggestion, not a shield. Chivalry, in theory, is a moral compass for warriors, a way to temper violence with virtue, to turn the sword not into an instrument of cruelty, but a vessel of justice. The church, ever concerned about knights who killed too well and too often, sought to reshape you into holy defenders. Warriors with prayer books, swords with souls. In practice, chivalry is a tapestry, beautiful from a distance, but fraying at every seam. The code shifts depending on who's reciting it. One priest will say to protect the innocent, to honor women, to serve God and Lord alike. Another will urge mercy, loyalty, honesty, humility. You've heard them all, memorized some, believed others. But in battle, no one stops to quote scripture. You fight, you survive, you take prisoners, sometimes because it's merciful, mostly because they're worth a ransom. You follow orders, even when they involve torching a village suspected of rebellion. Mercy, you learn, has a market rate. Truth is fine, unless it costs your lord a treaty. Many a lie has been dressed in noble language and shouted from horseback. You were taught to protect the weak, but on campaign, the weak are often the first to suffer. If peasants stand between your army and the enemy's grain, you ride through them. If the Lord commands justice, and justice looks like burning a hamlet to send a message, you strike the match. The songs tell of courtly love, of gallant men sighing beneath balconies, hearts aching for noble women they could never touch. But love in your world is tangled in property law. Marriages are arranged, alliances calculated, nobility revered, washerwomen ignored. And though many knights do strive for decency, the world doesn't often reward it. You've seen good men die because they hesitated. You've seen honest men lose everything because they told truths no one wanted to hear. Strangely, it's in tournaments that chivalry survives best. In the arena, the rules are clear. You salute your foe. You show restraint. You yield when beaten. It's pageantry, but it's pageantry with meaning. The actors know their roles, and for a brief moment, the script becomes real. There are even manuals, scrolls, and books outlining proper conduct. They tell you not to strike a man who's lost his helmet, to retrieve a lady's glove with decorum, to confess regularly, attend mass, avoid pride and gluttony. The church reinforces these ideals, branding you not just a warrior, but a guardian of divine order. Some houses take it seriously. Others quote it when convenient. One lord might knight his son after a single skirmish. Another might disown his heir for cowardice. There's no standard, just interpretation. And what you learn, what all knights eventually learn, is that chivalry isn't a sword to wield. It's a mirror. Some polish it, others shatter it. You try to follow it, at least in spirit. You help your squire without witnesses. You spare an enemy who yields, even when your companions sneer. You return to a burning village to carry out a wounded girl because she clung to your leg and whispered, "Please." No bard sings of these moments, but they stay with you longer than most victories, because they matter. They cost little, but they remind you of who you meant to become before the world got hold of you. Not every knight does this. Some wear the code like armor, on the outside polished and public, while inside they rot. They preach honor and practice cruelty. They quote scripture as they steal. You spot them easily now, clean crests, empty eyes. You avoid them, or when you can stand in their way. You've broken the code too. You've struck men who dropped their swords, taken what wasn't yours, looked away when you should have spoken. You're not pure, but you remember those who tried. The knight who held the pass so villagers could flee. The one who refused to torch a monastery, even under threat of exile. The one who died kneeling in the mud, not in surrender, but in prayer. So you try. In your own quiet way, you keep trying. The code isn't in a scroll. It's in habit, in choice. You pick it up like your sword each day, knowing it may slip, knowing it's imperfect, but carrying it anyway. Because without it, you're just a killer. And with it, maybe, just maybe, you are something more. This is chivalry. Not the chivalry of minstrels. Not the sermons or the heraldic flourishes. But the version you live. The one that survives in small moments when no one is watching. It's not about glory. It's about persistence. About falling short and rising again. About choosing, however quietly, not to become the thing you were sworn to fight. And with every such choice, you lift your sword a little straighter. You've trained for years, carried weapons long before you were allowed to swing them, polished armor for hours, watched comrades die before you earned your place beside them. But none of it prepares you for this. the moment the horns sound, the moment your warhorse shifts beneath you, the moment you stare across a field dotted with banners, men, and steel. The battlefield is not a song. It's not an epic poem. It is not a chessboard. It is a living thing, a screaming, pulsing beast of blood, mud, and chaos. And all the code in the world can't quiet it. Preparing for war starts long before the swords clash. You ride for days, sometimes weeks, through rain, dust, and silence. The army swells with each mile. The scent of sweat and horses thickens the air until it becomes something foul, sickly, unshakable. You begin to stink like your companions, like your horse, like war. Tempers fray, patience wears thin. The songs stop, the laughter fades. Every mile feels heavier than the last. You sleep in mud, eat whatever hasn't spoiled. Salted meat, crusty bread, dried peas. If you're lucky. If not, you chew and swallow and don't ask questions. Clean water is rare. Even when it's clear, you wonder what's floating in it. Armor, which once felt noble, becomes your burden. Cold in the morning, blistering by noon. You sleep with your boots on, sword within reach. Every sound becomes a possible threat. A snapped twig, a coughing horse. You don't sleep much. And then one morning you crest a hill, and there they are. The enemy, a mirror image. Flags fluttering in the same wind. Shields gleaming in the same sun. They're lined across the field, just as tired, just as ready, just as human. Orders come down, shouted, relayed, half-heard. You nod even if you don't catch them all. Everyone does. The specifics won't matter in the chaos. Your stomach tightens. You check your straps, say a prayer, or pretend to. Then the horns blow. The ground shakes, hoofs thunder, lances lower. You ride not as a man, but as momentum made flesh. The world narrows, time bends, and then impact. The moment of contact is like being punched by the earth itself. You strike, or you miss. You're hit, or you're lucky. If you fall, you hit hard. And if you don't rise quickly, you might not rise at all. The charge gives way to melee. You draw your sword. Engage. There's no elegance, no rhythm, only noise, screams, steel, shouts. You swing, you parry, you duck, you pray. You fight for inches, for breaths. You aim for armpits, joints, exposed gaps. You don't seek glory, you seek survival. If you're knocked down, the world becomes boots, hooves, and mud. You crawl, scramble, shove yourself upright. If your visor gets stuck or your foot snags, you're a turtle flipped on its back, hoping your squire finds you before someone else does. The line dissolves. Chaos reigns. You don't know friend from foe. You lash out at anything that moves wrong. The battle becomes its truest form, a storm of survival, not strategy. If you live, it ends not with cheers, but with exhaustion. You stagger back to camp. Strip your armor piece by piece. Your gloves are soaked with blood. You hope it's not yours. You can't tell. You see too much. A man you trained beside, lying still. A knight without his leg. A boy sobbing over his commander's body. The sounds stay with you, some louder than others, some worse in the quiet. Later, you walk the field, crows already picking through what's left. The wounded moan, the dying whisper. You try to help, but there are too many. Some you give water, some a prayer, some, when kindness demands it, you end. Looters work swiftly, stripping armor, coins, boots, even teeth. It's ugly, but war is expensive and spoils fun survival. You don't watch, you don't stop them. You've seen worse. Back at camp, no one boasts, no one drinks. Not the veterans. Not tonight. The ones who laugh now often cry later, when the fever sets in. You sit by the fire, silent, numb. Someone dresses your wounds. Someone else weeps softly in the dark. Then the count begins. How many horses lost? How many banners fell? How many men are missing? How many squires didn't return? In the days to come, the story will change. The Lord will deliver a speech. The priest will call it a righteous victory. Minstrels will write ballads, ignoring the screams, the mud, the shattered teeth. You'll be paraded through the streets. Children will throw flowers. The crowd will cheer, and you'll smile, nod, wave, all while remembering the face of the man you skewered, the sound of your friend bleeding out beside a broken shield. You do not forget. This is not the battlefield of legends, not the one from songs and stories. This is the real one, filthy, terrifying, loud, confusing. It doesn't care about codes. It doesn't pause for honor. It devours. You return to your post changed, older in ways no years can measure. Your hands shake sometimes. You stare too long at fires. You clean your sword again and again, even when it's already clean. You don't talk about it, not really. When younger squires ask, you teach them stance, timing, footwork. You don't describe the screams. You don't mention the pleading, not because you're ashamed, but because there are no words that make sense of it. And because you know they'd still want it. But you train them, you prepare them, you make sure they double-check their buckles, that they lift their shields even when exhausted. You know the price of small mistakes. You've seen it firsthand. The scars you carry fade on the outside, but inside they settle in. Not wounds, not anymore. Memories. You remember the night you dragged from the mud, the silence just before the charge, the way the field looked when it was over, wrong, broken, and still you ride again, because someone must, because war never ends. It just sleeps. You no longer fight for banners. Not really. Not even for glory. You fight for the man beside you, the one on your left, the one on your right, the squire who still believes in heroism, the prayer you whisper even when you don't believe it yourself. You were shaped by steel, but you were forged in that field, and you survived. And in that survival, you've learned what every inch of ground costs. Not in feet, not in paces, but in lives. There are no guides for what comes after. No parchment tells you how to keep going when the battles end, at least for now, and all that remains is the silence. You are still a knight. Your sword still hangs beside your bed. But you begin to feel something unfamiliar. Stillness. You ride patrols through quiet lands, past fields where wheat sways instead of banners. Children wave. Peasants nod. There are no cries for help, no ambushes. Just peace. And somehow, peace feels heavier than war. Your armor stays polished. Your weapons sharp. But they don't leave their racks as often. Instead, your days fill with requests, settling land disputes, escorting dignitaries, overseeing grain storage, resolving arguments over inheritance. You once cleaved through enemy lines. Now you listen to two farmers argue over a goat. The thrill fades, the glory dulls, but the work remains. You sit at long tables during councils, quiet while nobles bicker over tax rates. You give your opinion only when asked, and even then carefully. Politics, you learn, is its own battlefield. The weapons are words, and one poorly timed sentence can wound worse than a sword. You nod a lot, smile when you must, hide your exhaustion behind polished manners. Occasionally, you're summoned to court. You dress in your best. Your armor gleams. Your sword bears ceremonial ribbon. You stand straight, say the right things, and endure hours of pleasantries, flattery, and political dance. You are reminded often that your usefulness is tied to your discipline and your silence. At night, in your chambers, you take off the mask, the armor, the posture, the smile. You sit quietly, looking out at the stars, wondering if the boy who once swung wooden swords in the courtyard would recognize you now. Time passes strangely. You mark it in seasons, in how often your joints ache when it rains. Your hair grows longer. You stop polishing your boots every day. The gray at your temples starts to show. You still train, still ride, but not with the urgency you once carried. You teach more than you swing now. Your squire grows into himself, learns quickly. You see the ambition in his stance, the pride in how he straps your armor. He's good. He'll be better than you, and you're proud of that. When he's ready, you kneel him down. Place your sword to his shoulder. Speak the words with a voice steady and full of weight. You do not cry. Not until later, not where he can see. You begin to feel the shift. You are no longer the sharpest blade in the armory. Others rise, younger, faster, louder. Some are wise, some are reckless. You see yourself in all of them. Pieces, echoes, shadows. You learn when to step back, when not to volunteer, when your silence is more valuable than your sword. This too is service, and still you are called. A border dispute, a bandit threat, a failed harvest that turns desperate men into raiders. You ride out, lead men half your age. They watch you closely, follow your lead. You move slower than you once did, but with more purpose. Every motion has meaning. Every glance becomes a command. The battles are smaller, but they feel no less urgent. You remember to check your men's boots, their water, their morale. You speak less, but they listen more, because they know this night has seen it all. Afterward, you return home to silence, and you're grateful for it. In time, the hall where you once served fills with new faces. The old banners are retired, replaced by brighter ones. The lord who knighted you is long buried. His grandson now rules, a boy who still thinks armor shines forever. You advise him gently, patiently. You choose your moments. Sometimes he listens, sometimes he doesn't. You let him stumble within reason. Pain teaches what pride won't. And then one day you're asked to train squires. You hesitate. You think you've nothing left to give. But they arrive eager, messy, loud. You watch them trip, forget their stances, roll their eyes at prayer. And you remember. You teach them not just how to swing, but when not to. Not just how to win, but how to lose with grace. You tell them what no one told you, that courage is quieter than the songs claim, and that mercy is not weakness, but mastery. They listen, not always, but sometimes. You find purpose again. You teach them how to polish armor correctly, how to mount without scaring the horse, how to speak to commoners without condescension. You explain that honor isn't something you display. It's something you return to again and again, like a hearth that must be tended. In their eyes, you are a legend. In your own, you're just a man doing what he can. Sometimes you're invited to feasts. You sit farther from the Lord than you once did, but your seat is solid. Your cup full. When someone slanders an old knight's name, you speak up. Not loudly, but clearly. That's all it takes. The room falls quiet. The truth lands, and you return to your drink. You find comfort in routine. Morning rides, midday prayers, evening candlelight over dull steel. You write letters now, short, careful things, to old comrades, to children who barely remember you. You sign them plainly, no title, just your name. You begin to understand the life you've lived, not as legend, not as tragedy, but as something whole. You don't regret the scars, even the deepest ones. They remind you of where you've been and how far you made it. One winter, you wake to aching joints, heavier than usual. Snow piles outside the keep. The hearth crackles low. You stay by it longer these days. When spring comes, you mount one last time. You ride the edge of the forest. Alone, slow. The birds sing. The wind moves gently through your cloak. No trumpet sounds. No war waits. Just the world, quiet and open. You stop by a stream. Dismount. Kneel. Not in pain. Not in prayer. Just to feel the earth again. You drink from the water. Let it run over your hands. You are not who you were, but you are still here. And somehow that feels like enough. The end doesn't arrive with drums or banners. It doesn't come with a final charge or one last swing of your sword. It arrives quietly, like mist creeping over a field. One morning, you simply don't reach for your armor. You don't saddle your horse. You let the silence stretch. You're still a knight. That doesn't fade. But now the battles are behind you. The pages you once trained have pages of their own. The halls echo with younger voices. You are no longer the steel at the center, you are the stone they build around. You wake early still. Habits don't die. But now your mornings are slow, deliberate. You walk the grounds. Speak with the stable hands. Share bread with the cooks. You know all their names. They know yours not as a title but as a person. You visit the training yard. Watch sparring matches. Occasionally you offer a word, a correction, a praise, a story. They listen closely even if they don't show it. And when they try your old techniques and they work, you see it in their eyes. That flicker of understanding. The start of mastery. In the evenings, you sit by the hearth with a cup of wine. Not to forget, but to remember gently. The fire warms your joints. The laughter from the great hall drifts through the walls. You smile at nothing in particular. Your sword still hangs above the mantle. The steel dulled now. The grip worn smooth. It hasn't left its place in years. You dust it once a week like a ritual, like thanks. You've buried comrades, too many to count. Some in grand tombs, some in shallow graves beside battlefield roads. You remember them all, their laughs, their flaws, the way they gripped a blade, the way they fell. You keep their memory alive, not through speeches or monuments, but through the way you speak of them, simply, honestly, as they were. Visitors come sometimes, younger knights, sons of old friends. They bring wine, bread, letters. They ask for advice, or stories, or blessings. You give what you can. You never call yourself wise, but you've lived, and that's something. There are nights when sleep comes hard. Dreams find you, not nightmares, just echoes. The crunch of frost under boots, the snap of banners, the weight of armor. Sometimes you wake with your fist clenched, heart pounding. You breathe, drink water, return to bed. You do not curse those memories. They are yours. They made you. You walk slower now, but with more intention. Your words are fewer, but they land heavier. You no longer feel the need to prove yourself. You simply are. And still, sometimes in the garden or along the forest edge, your hand drifts to your side, searching for a sword that isn't there. You smile when it happens. That part of you never left. You keep writing, not for record, not for glory, but so that something of this life remains. You write names, dates, feelings, the small things, the way a shield vibrates when struck just right, or how a warhorse breathes before a charge. Things that stories forget, but souls remember. Your handwriting is slower, but careful, honest. The seasons pass. Winter settles in your bones. Spring wakes them again. You learn to sit with your aches, your silences, your memories. You don't chase after youth, but you welcome those who still carry it. You bless marriages, name children, speak at funerals. You do not fear your own. When it comes, you hope for something simple, a quiet room, a warm fire, someone to hold your hand, not because you're afraid, but because you've held so many others. Feels right. You imagine your old squire, now a knight, now a lord, visiting your resting place. You imagine him pausing, maybe even smiling, not because you were perfect, but because you mattered. And if there is a prayer whispered, you hope it's short, direct, something like, he served, he stood, he endured, because that is the truth. You did not seek legend, you sought purpose, and you found it, not in the roar of crowds or the gleam of banners, but in the quiet things, in the steadiness of your hand when others faltered, in the word you offered when silence felt safer, in the times you chose to rise again and again despite the weight. You were a knight, and not just in title, in action, in intent, in heart. Let the world remember its kings and its conquerors. Let the minstrels sing of dragons and destiny. You will be remembered in smaller ways, in the tightened grip of a squire about to ride, in the repaired buckle on a young knight's gauntlet, in the pause before battle when someone recalls your calm. That is enough. That is everything. Your story ends as it began, not in grandeur, but in grace. And in that stillness you rest.